Hello and welcome to another episode of the More You Know podcast. Today we'll be dusting off that old Magic 8 Ball. You remember
isn't
those?
That a crazy one?
You remember
that's
those?
That's a crazy little. That's a fun little title, isn't it?
Yeah.
We always like to shake things up a little bit.
Of course. Well, we got to get that clickbait.
Yeah. So
what
dusting. I remember that. Those were those 8 balls, the little ones that had the windows on the bottom.
Yeah. I know there's a few people listening right now. They've got them somewhere in their office, and then there's other people that are like, I haven't. No
you shake them up and they
about.
say, you ask them a yes or no question. Do you think I'm going to be, do you think I'm going to be successful today in whatever it is I'm doing? And you shake it up and it goes, not very likely, or
those are the rough ones,
or concentrate and ask again later. Stuff like that.
Or the one that was sort of like the disappointing one where it's like answers unsure. I'm like, they had to finish one thing off on that dice, and we're like, yeah, we just don't know either.
Well,
so why did we pick this for our podcast name? And I think the reason why is that we get a lot of questions these days about what is this crazy market doing and what's it going to do in the future. And we'd like to say that we have a crystal ball, but things aren't that clear.
We've used that a couple of times, and it hasn't worked out all that well.
Yeah.
So we have to use the crystal ball in conjunction with some pretty solid factual sources that
exactly
from a real big cross section.
Right, because for every article you find going one way, there's a contradicting article going the other way. So. We're just going to help you try to sift through, again, this is all professional opinion. We'll have other professionals that probably think a little bit differently than we do, and that's okay too. But for what we see and what we've, looked over and studied and done multiple articles on the same subject to kind of glean from the best information out of each one that we can, we're going to tell you a little bit about what we think this market is and what it's going to be in the future.
Not to toot a horn here, but between us, we got like 50 years in this marketplace, right?
That's right.
So a lot of the stuff that you see on the internet is really, really valuable information, but it's also specific to other parts of the country. So
right, and I should make that a quick clarification that we're based in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Grand Rapids is a very unique community, and we're not huge, but we're not small by any means, and we have a lot of great things happening here. So what holds true for us may not hold true at all for the rest of the country. Yep. We are going to throw out a few things that might be kind of countrywide, but whenever we're talking local, it's going to be for Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Exactly right. Yep. Exactly right.
So the first thing is, what's going on right now? Like, why are we feeling pretty decent about where the market is and, how it's jumped up, why we're where we're at right now?
Well, I would say this. So sometimes on a twice a week basis, we go back to certain touch points that we've kind of gravitated toward these different sources that seem to be reasonable, middle of the road, giving us not too negative and not too positive, but also it gives us a more of a broad cross section of what's happening out there. And I think the reason why we're feeling not so nervous about what's coming. Everybody, likes to bring up, what are we in a bubble? When's this thing going to, break? and they're all comparing it to past times when that's happened, right?
Right.
And we've gone through that, so we know. But this is kind of a little bit different. I mean, we have great fundamentals. We have really, really good employment. We have people with 800 credit scores, lots of cash in the bank.
Right.
Those are fundamentals that were not present in other marketplaces that kind of went south.
Right.
So is that the only thing we're hanging our hat on? No. There's a lot of other things that we're going to be talking about just a little bit later in this podcast. A little further down. That really kind of, when you put it all together, it is not as, at least to us, it's not as concerning as what you would think prior to the crash of 2008 or something. Yeah.
And that does bring us to the next question. Why is now not 2008? Like what are the different signs? What are the things that are keeping us from having that bubble burst, really?
Well, so in the same way that our fundamentals are good here, today, those were not present back in the lead up to 2008.
Right.
There was a certain amount of government intervention and there was a big push for home ownership. That was kind of like the big thing where regardless of, who's in power,
right.
everybody likes to see this. Home ownership is the bedrock of the American society, and we obviously believe that.
Right.
But when you try to force a square peg in a round hole, what you're going to get is not a very good outcome, right?
Right.
And so there was a lot of government involvement with that. Community Lending Act was going on at the time. There were other things where it wasn't the greatest fundamental situation. People didn't have cash,
right?
And then the banks were being directed to lend money to folks that essentially didn't have money,
right?
So what do you think American businesses are going to do when that happens?
They're going to take a mile if you give them an inch.
They're gonna pivot a little bit,
yeah.
And without getting into too many details, I mean that's where derivatives came from. That's where mortgage-backed securities. Where the banks are saying, "Oh, geez, they're going to make us, lend to the people that are less than good credit risk," and so what they got together and kind of the stock market said, "Hey, if we can put these into a security package and sell them the open market, and we can spread our risk, then that should be better."
Right.
And from there, it kind of turned into profit opportunities. Mortgage companies popped up overnight. The regulations weren't in place to control that. And so everybody was making money hand over fist on the lending side.
Right.
At the expense, again, why we find this surprising, at the expense of people that could least afford it.
Right.
And, sometimes personally, we saw mortgage companies making, and I'm not saying mortgage companies are bad. I mean, certain lenders in that marketplace were taking profits of $10,000 to $15,000 on
each
loans.
loan.
Yeah,
and
terrible.
Mind you, keep in mind these are all people that they're not around anymore.
Nope.
They're gone.
Yep.
A lot of things that got put in place to keep 2008 from happening again. They were at least effective in making those people move on.
It was predatory, and
absolutely.
I think we can feel real comfortable in saying it was predatory.
Right.
That's what they were making some money, and now we don't sit in that situation anymore.
No.
So I think that we should feel good about that.
Right.
That 2008's not around. We're in a different marketplace, and we're seeing this happen because millennials were, they were being born. Now they're getting older. Here we are in this marketplace, and right after 2008, we saw a huge drop off in construction. The economy tanked. Everything was really in a bad spot. So consequently, over time, even when the market and the economy started to recover a little bit, building never caught up, never replaced the demand that we needed to have. And at the same time, we lost skilled tradespeople left and right.
Right. And there's
moved
been,
on to different jobs.
Right. And there's been studies that have said, in a 10-year period of time, we have about 20 million units built in that 10-year period of time. Well, between 2008 and 2018, there are only 5 million. So
we're really short, and
even super short. And obviously, we've been trying to play catch up over the last 5 years or so, but we're still coming up short.
Well, absolutely. And the reason, and it should be no surprise to anyone why we're coming up short. The lack of tradespeople. We just went through a 2-year pandemic. The ability to even get in the supply chain, things like doors on a frame or appliances or
windows are
all
huge.
Some of these things are taking 6 months to a year to even come in, right? So when you put all that together and you put the lack of tradespeople out there, you can't just conjure up somebody who knows how to do something that's skilled labor.
Right. We even have some owner of businesses that are going in, and they're going into grade school classrooms to try to get kids interested in the trades, because they know coming up very soon that the people that they do have, and they don't have enough as it is, are going to be retirement age, and
could be aging out.
They're going to be aging out of the job.
It's a really interesting time in the business.
Right.
Obviously, we're everybody over the history kind of faces their own little things. I look at that and I say, well, at least we're not in World War II,
Right.
where we're facing rationing or anything else like that.
Yeah.
So we have to put things in perspective and recognize that, we're all going to face our challenges depending upon when we're in the market.
Mm-hmm.
And because now, we might want to just say we feel positive about that because we're entering this place where, no, it's not good that interest rates are rising, but sort of it is.
Right. And, and there's a very good reason for that. I mean, we were seeing, 40 people offering on a home, and, when they're driving the prices up. Some homes were going for nearly $100,000 more than their original asking price.
That's true.
And that becomes a problem.
Yeah, and some still, we're not out of that marketplace.
Not just yet.
Yeah, and we could use a little balance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from a seller's perspective, we're not going to see a drop in the pricing anytime soon, because what we're still in is we might see a difference between 4 or 5 offers against 14.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's and just so everybody knows, I mean, I personally with my wife, we've made purchases at 8.5%. I think one loan that we had, early on was, it was normal to have an 11.5% loan.
Right.
So the power, the borrowing power, the buying power, obviously our prices were lower. But when you start putting all these things together, it's not as dire as it looks.
Right. And I think one of the important things to point out is with interest rates, I think what happened is that they went up pretty sharply earlier in this year.
Yep.
And it kind of gave people a pause.
Yep.
But I believe that's exactly what it is a pause, is those who are still well qualified, who still have money in the bank, they're taking a small breather if they're not even just still out there looking and making moves. But it's just going to be a little bit of a sticker shock. But eventually, everything will kind of get normalized, and they'll go back out and start looking. And
the only wild card in this whole thing is inflation, and nobody knows what's going to happen with regard to where we are.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole. I try not to be reactionary. We try really hard to make sure that we're accessing the right information and getting a very wide range of that whole thing. And I think what we're seeing is, yes, we should all be nervous. Yes, we don't like the pricing we're seeing, but sellers should still think about selling right now. The prices are still going to remain firm, and buyers, this might actually be a little bit of a respite in that competition setting.
Right.
Are you going to pay a little bit more price-wise because of the interest rate? Yes. Are you going to have as much competition that forces it into the stratosphere? Probably not.
Probably, yeah. So you have much less likelihood.
Choose your poison, right?
Yeah. Well, then on top of that, rents are going up too. So you
40%.
You do have to balance both to make the decision what's right for you.
Yeah, it's a bit of a difficult situation to be in the market these days, but probably when you really look at it in totality, we went through the back of the 2008 deal and lost 35% of the value of our house.
Right.
So there's all these different things that it's timing
you could
related.
say it's a market adjustment. It could be a snapback. Whatever, however you want to do it. Yeah. But I will say, it was a fun time for me too, because I started in 2007. So I was like, great. Oh, this is a regular roller coaster going on.
Yeah.
But I think that overall we're still pretty optimistic. We see not so much of we don't even really see much of a decline. We're thinking more of a plateau, and we're going to get more to that 3 to 6% maybe.
I would say so, which is really healthy appreciation. But it's not the 33% total
that we've been.
Right.
Yeah.
We experienced 20% increase last year alone, right?
Which
so you
is
look
not
at that,
sustainable.
No, it's not. 13% before, 20% after that, and you look at that and you go, supply and demand, people moving out of people moving to remote work, all of these things really, when you look at them, kind of are expected. Pandemic on top of that, all of these things come together, shortage of materials, shortage of labor. You comes to this thing where it's literally a supply and demand.
Right.
And I feel pretty good about the fact that New York City, San Francisco, big markets like that have always taught us that, if there's always a demand, a steady demand for whatever the space is, it's going to be more expensive.
That space is going to be expensive.
Yeah. So anyway.
Well, hopefully we didn't. Hopefully we brought in the positive for you, so you feel okay. I know that was a little bit more heavy-handed on the real estate side than we normally do. Yep. However, we wanted to make sure that you guys weren't just looking towards that 8-ball, shaking it, asking it questions.
And just so you know, we're not giving you advice based upon the 8-ball.
No, we are not.
It's like, should we tell somebody to buy a house? Concentrate and ask again.
Yeah, exactly. No. I lost my 8-ball. I did try to look for it on this podcast. But.
Shoot, man, we're aging out of our of our reference points too. Probably, but go out and look at it. If you don't know what the Magic 8-ball is,
things are coming back. I mean, it could be the new thing. Last year was tie-dye. Tie-dye was back. That wasn't even a thing when I was around.
Shoot, man, I like it.
Right,
everything revisits.
So, we do like to bring you fun and interesting content. And, next time we'll come up with another one. Hopefully it'll be a little bit more, joshing back and forth. But joshing, what is that
joshing,
from? I don't know.
That's another reference point that nobody would get.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Anyway. But, if you guys would like to hear more about this, but also ask questions or have the subject matter that you'd like to add, or get in on our newsletter. A lot of the times when we do something that's really in depth, we'll have a podcast on it. We'll kind of touch on the high points, and then we go more into depth. And you will be able to see that on in the newsletter. So what you can do is you can go to our website. You can click on the Contact Us page, and you can submit your information, and then we'll start sending you a newsletter. So it'll be really easy. You can also ask questions and all those types of things. So,
and if you'd like to have a little bit more individualized information, kind of we're like everybody else. We're dependent upon other sources, but like we said, we know this market really well. And if you'd like to have another a more in-depth conversation, we'd encourage you to call us, right?
Right, absolutely.
This is a really pivotal time to be thinking about whether you're going to be a buyer or seller. So,
and sometimes both. If you really need to move out of what you've got and purchase on the other side, we can help you navigate. We will not bring the 8-ball. We will talk. We'll have a good conversation and help you decide what's best for you. Because ultimately, you're the one captaining that ship. So
absolutely. No doubt about it.
Well, thank you again so much for stopping by. We hope to see you again real soon on another episode of the More You Know podcast.